Ayan, nangangalahati na tayo sa Chapter 5. In this discussion, we will talk about communicating with the predecessor or the existing auditor. So I'm Sophia Gabuat from CBET 01701P. Let's start the presentation. First, mag-overview muna tayo, which the video lecture will introduce the two types of auditor, which is the predecessor auditor and the successor auditor in an audit engagement. We will also learn about the procedures in communicating with the predecessor auditor. So let's dig into the topic. But before we proceed in the definition of the predecessor auditor, let's define muna what is predecessor. So Tagalog, ito yung sinundan o nauna o hinalinhan. Synonymous siya sa word na former, prior, or previous. So in simple term, it is someone or an auditor who conducted audit for a client in prior or previous periods but who is no longer part of the audit engagement for the current period. So this may arise in any of the following circumstances. First is the auditor may become the predecessor if the client has notified that his or her contract will not be renewed for the current or future audits. So ibig sabihin, in this case, that yung management has an intention na baguhin or change the auditor for the next audit engagement or for its future audits. Excuse me. So, hindi na siya yung auditor sa future audits. The second one is, may isa pang instances. If the auditor himself resigned from the engagement, meaning to say, sa case na to, yung auditor has terminated his or her services from the client. So, pag nangyari ito, he or she will become the predecessor auditor. The next one is, isa pang instances is when the auditor has declined to return for the next audit or did not complete the prior audit engagement. Maybe because sabi nga natin kanina sa previous slide na pwede siyang nag-resign or maybe hindi niya na-complete yung audit engagement. So all these instances makes him or her a predecessor auditor. Well, in this case naman, when by the way, we will define deeply the successor auditor in the next presenter. But when we say successor auditor, simply, he or she is someone na magiging new or bagong auditor. So when the new auditor is appointed to an audit engagement, so he or she may need to communicate sa predecessor auditor about various issues that is relevant and incorporated in the new auditor's audit. If he or she will accept ba or reject the audit engagement, he or she also needs to ask the predecessor auditor about relevant matters related to previous auditing engagement. So if so, does the successor excuse me. If so, does the successor auditor or the new auditor will have to seek first the permission of the client before he or she can discuss the matter with the predecessor auditor. So meaning to say here that there should be a permission from the client so that the new auditor can ask matters related to the previous audit on or from the predecessor auditor. This will also one of the basis of incoming or new auditor if he or she will accept or reject the audit engagement. So the term predecessor auditor is also defined in PSA. So they define it as the auditor who has previously the auditor of an entity and who has been replaced by an incoming auditor. So this is how the PSA define the term predecessor auditor. But if we will try to compare it with the first definition that we had, they still have the same meaning. So based on the statement of auditing standards, they define the statement of the auditing standards, they define the predecessor auditor as follows. Excuse me. First, a predecessor auditor has reported on the most recent audited FS, or he or she was engaged to perform it, but he or she did not complete the audit of the FS. Well, we also mentioned it with the previous slides where the auditor may have resigned from the audit engagement or he or she did not return from the new audit engagement. Kaya hindi niya nakompleto yung auditing ng FS. Another instance is the auditor has resigned, which we already mentioned it before, or he or she may have declined to stand for reappointment, which means that he will not return to become the auditor of the entity for the new audit engagement, or that he or she may have been notified that his or her services have been or may be terminated, which is also the same as we mentioned earlier when the auditor had notified by the client that they will no longer seek for his or her services. So that's it for the predecessor auditor, and the successor auditor will be discussed by the next presenter. Thank you.